And I hope we have once again reminded people that man is not free unless government is limited. There's a clear cause and effect here that is as neat and predictable as a law of physics. As government expands, liberty contracts.
From this day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
Welcome back. It is Thursday, December 14th, 2023. We are less than 2 weeks away from celebrating the birth of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And the Christmas season is in full swing now for most of us. I know that I'm already quite tired of requisite Christmas parties and cocktails and indulgences, but we will get through it, ladies and gentlemen, and move on to January of 2024 and the long slog to the election season that lies ahead. Merry Christmas indeed, everybody. Hey, I know we're thinking about our families and our own country right now, but I have to bring something to everyone's attention about our mortal enemy, China. And sometimes you have to sort of tie things together to understand the full magnitude of what a threat China is to our nation and to the world. I thought of this today as I was sipping from this mug, which bears the beautiful American flag. It was given to me as a gift several years ago. It comes from the very well-known purveyor of fine kitchenware and dinnerware and other wares, Williams-Sonoma. When you turn this thing over, what does it say on the bottom? Made in China. Can you imagine? Here's to you, Xi Jinping. But really, think about this. Think about this. Sebastian Gorka, the great former aide to Donald Trump and now a widely seen media commentator, he did some research which really stopped me in my tracks. Listen to this. From the end of World War II in 1945 until the present, the number of Americans in uniform who have given their lives, who have been killed in the line of duty in wars, is about just over 103,000 men and women. Okay? 45 to 23. So for you Democrats following along at home, that's just a little shy of 80 years. Now, in a 12-month period, recorded by the CDC, let's say 12 months from right now to a year ago, the number of fentanyl-related deaths in the United States, deaths among Americans due to fentanyl, 110,000. It comes from China. Does it get here by accident? Oh, no, it doesn't, ladies and gentlemen. It is sent here quite deliberately as part of China's slow, gruesome war on America. We saw it in a big magnitude during the unleashing of the Chinese bioweapon known as the Wuhan virus. But the slow drip, drip, drip continues with the fentanyl deaths. And of course, as long as we have a porous, open southern border, those deaths will continue. And you know what else China does? They fund all of our worst enemies, including Iran and Russia. How do they do that? In October, Reuters reported that by importing oil from sanctioned countries like Russia and Iran, China is not only getting oil on the cheap, it's saving itself about $10 billion in import costs. So they're making money by sending money to our adversaries. Iran, the underwriter of terror, the underwriter of Hamas, as we speak in Israel. Russia, the invader of Ukraine. Ukraine, the recipient of hundreds of billions of dollars from the United States coffers for a war that seems to have no final objective or outcome. So when you tie everything together, it really makes you wonder how these Trump derangement people can fixate on all the terrible things that are coming our way as a country if and when Donald J. Trump is reelected President of the United States this coming November 2024. The completely maniacal Atlantic magazine recently assigned 24 different writers / thumbsuckers to do different essays on what's going to happen if Trump wins, imagining the country under another Trump presidency. So now we've just said all of this about what an unchecked China is doing, and that's under the Biden regime. In other words, China sees a green light every time they turn around with the Biden White House, and they're taking advantage of it. Because as Donald Trump has been noted of saying about adversaries, they're not dumb people. They're not dumb. They're evil. That's the difference. One Atlantic scribe wrote this garbage. After the shock of Trump's 2016 victory, the denial and rationalizations kicked in fast. Just ride out the embarrassment for a few years, many thought, and then America would revert to something in the ballpark of sanity. But one of the overlooked portents of 2020 was that the election was still extremely close, the re-election of Trump. Trump received 74 million votes, nearly 47% of the electorate. That's a huge amount of support, especially after such an ordeal of a presidency. So remember what we just talked about, the ordeal we're living in now, we're enduring now, and this so-called ordeal of the Trump presidency, 2017 to 21. He goes on to write that though people are supporting him, he continues to test their loyalty. He hasn't exactly enhanced his resume since 2020, unless you count a second impeachment and a bunch of indictments as selling points. Well, do you think the indictments were legitimate in any way? Of course not. So, yes, his supporters continue to support him because they know the indictments are bogus. And this guy writes about them as if they are handed down by legitimate judges and district attorneys. January 6th, he writes, posed the biggest hazard, the brutality of it, the fever of the multitudes, and Trump's obvious pride in the whole furor. Even the GOP lawmakers who still vouched for Trump from their Capitol safe rooms seem shaken. But let's just remember one thing, ladies and gentlemen. They're not just afraid of Trump. They're afraid of us. And that's why they're writing about Trump supporters and his road to 2024 as if it poses an unbelievable threat. Listen to this. You can dismiss Trump voters all you want, but give them this. They're every bit as American as any idealized vision of the place. If Trump wins in 2024, his detractors will have to reckon once again with the voters who got us here, to reconcile what it means to share a country with so many citizens who keep watching Trump spiral deeper into his moral void and still conclude, yes, that's our guy. So the Atlantic has the nerve, the audacity to write about morality. How about reality? How about the reality of a Biden regime that is a train wreck by every measurement, by every gauge? Drives you crazy, doesn't it? Meanwhile, we're supposed to pretend like China on the loose, threatening every day to invade Taiwan, fully behind Iran and Russia in all of its plans for the end of Western civilization, really, is what I would say. But let's move on. We talked about those numbers. Here's some more numbers. Here's a number that will blow you away. Today, I was watching a Charlie Kirk podcast, excellent young up-and-coming stalwart of conservatism, Charlie Kirk. He had a guest on from a D.C. solitary confinement prison cell, Washington, D.C. His name is Jack Lang. He was in the Capitol on 6 January 2021, the famous insurrection. He is one of these who has been detained without a trial since that day, or since he was arrested. You know how long he's been in this jail with no hope of a trial? He said they gave him 8 minutes to talk to Charlie from his cell. He's been detained, mostly in solitary, for 1,060 days. 1,060 days, Jack Lang. Now, I went and I read what he's charged with. You know, it sounds pretty bad. Assault, resisting arrest, disrupting a congressional proceeding, the usual stuff that we've heard about. Now, tell me how many folks during the summer of love carried out by BLM, tell me how many of the folks who destroyed businesses, shattered glass, set buildings and churches on fire and vehicles on fire, and assaulted and attacked policemen, how many of those people are rotting in prison cells 1,060 days on from the day they committed their atrocities in full light of day? How many of them? How about none? A few have been arrested. Cops, the George Floyd cop is in prison to this day, recently avoided death after being stabbed 22 times. But think about that. And if you want to do more than think about these prisoners rotting, there's a website where you can go with a few keystrokes. It is called supportj6.com. No, I'm sorry, sponsorj6.com. Let me repeat that. Sponsor J as in January, 6, the number.com. There you can go and donate to sponsor the families of these guys who are rotting in prison cells, to help them be able to help their loved ones who are basically political prisoners in the United States of America. Political prisoners. All right, I got a lot more to get to, so let us move right on. Well, remember a few years ago when Joe Biden was giving a speech and he was lamenting what racists the conservative right are made up of, comprised of? And remember when he said this, they're going to put you all back in chains. Remember that? Meaning all you folks who are black. Those Republicans are going to put you all back in chains, he said. And they howled in approval of his ridiculous prediction. Well, guess what the Democrats are doing now, specifically the Joe Biden White House? They're not putting anybody in chains, but guess what they've got going on a video now to acknowledge the Christmas season? Well, by golly, they've got black people tap dancing inside the halls of the White House, just like days of old. You got to watch this thing. It's a version of a very well-known Christmas theme, the Nutcracker, and it is such a joke. All of the tap dancers are people of color, except for one. And the only white male that's in the thing has a flower blooming out of the top of his head to make him look absolutely absurd and ridiculous. A flower blooming out of the top of his head, okay? Go watch this thing. You can find it. It's all over social media now because it is such a hilarious disaster. You can't even, I don't know, I don't have further words to describe, how very stupid it is. But, it's amazing how the race card is played all the time, at every turn by the left, even in a Christmas video. Of course, we've seen it again recently, writ large, as they say, at Harvard University. Now, the poor, mumbling, stumbling white president of University of Pennsylvania, she's fired because she couldn't say whether or not anti-Semitism speech on her campus was acceptable or unacceptable. And her board of directors in Pennsylvania said, "You got to go. Sorry, darling, you're out." And she is out. But somehow the president of Harvard, Darlene Gay, isn't it beautiful? The president of Harvard, Darlene Gay. Saturday Night Live did a skit about their testimony, and they started out by saying, "Let's get this out of the way, President Gay. Could you tell us, say something about your last name so we can just get that out of the way and move on with the rest of the hearing?" Anyway, great piece by the very articulate and timely Christopher Rufo. Higher education ideological rot has been exposed for Americans to see, but the elites who adhere to such thinking retain control of these institutions. His point is that the president of Harvard, who said the same things, unwilling to denounce anti-Semitic speech on the Harvard campus, she's still at Harvard because they're so more deeply entrenched ideologically on the left that she didn't apparently have to worry about it. He makes a reference to a 20th century Italian Marxist theorist. Everybody, good work if you can get it, right? Marxist theorist, Antonio Gramsci, who outlined the distinction between, quote, the war of maneuver, in which a political actor can quickly topple a centralized, weakly structured regime, and the war of position, in which a political actor must wage a protracted fight against an entrenched bureaucracy. At Harvard, the war of maneuver has failed, he writes, but there is a silver lining. The institution's ruling ideology has been exposed to the public. The university has sacrificed its academic integrity to retain a president who minimized genocidal rhetoric against Jews, oversaw a racially discriminatory admission system, ensnared herself in multiple personal scandals, and lifted sections of at least 4 academic papers, plagiarism, all because she is the living embodiment and administrative enforcer of diversity, equity, and inclusion ideology. What should critics of Harvard and other elite institutions do now? As the Italian Marxist theorist warned, they must prepare for a war of position, a long, grueling form of conflict in which ideological opponents contest the ruling regime at each part of the front lines. In practice, the means continuing to uncover the ideological corruption within America's institutions and building a counter-elite capable of challenging those institutions. The work has already begun. Recent campaigns against critical race theory, gender ideology, and DEI have eroded trust in educational institutions. Meanwhile, the left's rhetorical magic, smearing critics as racist, sexist, and homophobic, has lost its power due to years of unjustified use. So the point is, some of these people may not lose their jobs now, but the damage that they're doing over time will show them losing this longer war, this long game war that we are responsible for waging against them. And wage it we will. Correct, ladies and gentlemen? How about this one? This is a beauty. The National Defense Authorization Act. In Washington, they call it the NDAA. Not to be confused with the NCAA, where they are now paying athletes obscene amounts of money to not go to class and make a lot of revenue for the universities playing sports. It's the NDAA. It's a big bill. It has to pass every year to fund our military industrial complex and our various branches of military. And of course, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't have to really worry about the process behind passing this appropriation. It's an annual required appropriation. But this time is different because why? The left, ladies and gentlemen, the House under Mike Johnson, the new speaker, was going to stand in the breach when they try to fill up these bills with stuff that we can't support. But guess what we did today, ladies and gentlemen? The Senate passed a version of the NDAA, and then the House turned around and passed it as well. And what did they pass? Well, let me just share with you what's in here. See, what we should have stood against and why this bill should have been delayed instead of fast-tracked so everybody can go home for Christmas. Here's what's in here. Yes, it does contain a 5% pay raise for the military. Nobody's arguing with a 5% pay raise for our active duty military. Of course not. But for those who green-lighted the rest of the dollars in this bill, here's what they're going along with. Here's what the part of it that was hijacked by the left, and we have Republicans like U.S. Congressman Richard Hudson, the 9th District, who represents Moore County right here in Washington. Here's what it's going to have in it, and here's what it's going to allow. The extension of a short-term federal surveillance powers provision. That's called Section 702. We know what that's been used for, going back to the Trump election cycle of 2016, spying with unwarranted access on Americans. So this NDAA allows a 4-month extension of this warrantless spying. 4 more months, right into the heart of a new election season when, gee, do you think there'll be any spying going on in the inside the Trump campaign? Gee, I'd be shocked, wouldn't you? Here's what it also does. It's going to fund travel by military spouses who seek abortions in states where it's not prohibited or restricted. So we're using taxpayer dollars to aid and abet folks in our military, women in our military, who want to have an abortion but live in a state where it's banned or heavily restricted. So we're going to pay for them to go over state lines to go get their abortion, to kill that baby. That's part of this national defense bill. What else is in there? It's going to provide gender-affirming medical care to transgender troops. Well, I can only imagine how fast in his grave General Dwight Eisenhower is spinning right now at the very thought that we have transgender troops who require gender-affirming treatment. Because, you know, we want them affirmed when they're out there tiptoeing around the battlefield, don't we, ladies and gentlemen? And last but not least, this bill is going to allow the promotion of diversity in the ranks, the military ranks, by permitting drag queen shows on military bases. I wish it's breathtaking, isn't it? But we caved on that. And you know how we caved? How, to the degree to which Republicans caved? In the House, when all was said and done, more Democrats in the minority voted to pass the bill than Republicans. And we have the majority in the House. So I would say that Speaker Mike Johnson's honeymoon is not only over, but I think it's time to start, looking into divorce proceedings once again. Once again, another speaker who is letting us down. It just makes you want to throw up. It really does. Okay, I've got some late breaking news for those of you who are keeping track of this in the state of North Carolina. There was some speculation over the past several weeks that the longtime Rockingham County Sheriff, Sam Page, who had months ago said that he was running for Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina this coming year, 2024. There was speculation that he was in talks with supporters to primary the Senate president, the Republican Phil Berger, in Raleigh. Now, Phil Berger is about as entrenched a machine politician as you can find. And he showed that. He showed that he is fearless against blowback, earlier this year when he tried to jam legalized expanded casino gambling down the throats of the legislature by holding up the state budget bill to try to get it in there. Well, it failed. And there was thinking that there was enough support for Sam Page to primary Berger this spring. The primary election day is March 5th, but heck, the early voting starts on February 15th. Well, today, Page announced that he would file, after all, to run for lieutenant governor. I believe there are 7 running for lieutenant governor. He would be an excellent lieutenant governor from everything I've seen, and I have actually had a conversation with Mr. Page. He's been the sheriff in Rockingham County since 1998. He's a stalwart conservative, and he has been engaged by the Trump campaigns the last time around to be one of their on-the-ground coordinators for the Trump campaign. So he has engaged at the national level, though he is a county sheriff here in North Carolina, up in the northern climes of North Carolina. So that's a little breaking news for you as we get down to the final moments of this incredible Liberty podcast. And I appreciate all the kind words that are coming in about the work we're doing here, and we pledge to continue to work to make it better and better and better. Now, for those of you who are thinking about the holiday season in terms of doing something more meaningful than having yet another party, buying yet another gift for somebody you don't even like very much, the stuff that we're supposed to be obligated to do in the name of celebrating the birth of Christ. Well, how about this activity this Saturday, December 16th? The laying of the wreaths. There's an organization called Wreaths Across America. And on the 16th of December, it falls this year on Saturday the 16th, 2 days from right now, you can go to any number of cemeteries, military cemeteries in your area, to participate in the laying of wreaths on each and every headstone in that cemetery. The more Republican women will be assembling in West End, North Carolina, at the Seven Lakes Military Cemetery, which is principally a cemetery honoring the dead of the Vietnam era. And they will be there at 10 a.m. Saturday, 16 December. You can go ahead and Google more Republican women or Seven Lakes Cemetery in West End, North Carolina. And then also at the big cemetery in Fayetteville, they will be assembling at noon. I believe that's the Spring Lake Cemetery in Fayetteville. That's quite a massive facility. And a number of us were there last year to lay the wreaths. It just makes you remember in a very tangible way what we have lost to advance the freedoms that we enjoy, the freedoms to worship, to celebrate the birth of Christ, the freedoms to vote, the freedoms that we take for granted so often as we go about our everyday lives. But let us never do that, ladies and gentlemen, especially this season, a season of giving and giving back. And that's the latter, I think, is what we should all focus on. I told you that during these podcasts, I would point out some items in the studio here that are part of the tapestry that is my existence. Right there, ladies and gentlemen. Where is it? Where's my finger? Hey, there it is. See that? That's an Emmy Award. Now you're saying, hey, he's got an Emmy Award. You must be a big deal. Well, here's the little secret about Emmy Awards. When you work for a network in any capacity at a big event, and if that network is awarded an Emmy for the coverage of that event, everybody involved gets an Emmy. On camera, off camera, the guy who sweeps up at the end of the day, everybody gets one. So that Emmy was from the 2000 Sydney Olympic Games, these 23 years ago. I was there in Sydney working as a humble writer behind the scenes, writing and scripting content for the highly paid men and women on camera. And believe me, some of them, if they open their mouth without a teleprompter, nothing comes out, I'm here to tell you. So that's my little keepsake from the Sydney Olympics. It's a pretty nice souvenir, I have to say, not to belittle it too much. But those were the days when I was young and traversing the globe in pursuit of trivial things like coverage of the Olympic Games and the like. And what a time it was, oh, so many years ago. Thank you for joining us as we count down to the Christmas season. We hope to see you next time right here for another episode of the Liberty Podcast.